Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. Alright, and welcome back to part 2 of my Masterclass look at Secrets of the Lost Tomb, a Masterclass in abundance. Today's episode, we're going to focus on the cards, but before we do that, we're going to take a look at a couple of things. So last episode, we took a look at one of the characters, this super powerful solo character, Harrison Quatermass the 13th. The Harrison is obviously a tribute to Harrison Ford. This is kind of a Indiana Jones style character. And the Quatermass is obviously a tribute to Alan Quatermain, the creation of H. Rider Haggard, who appeared in King Solomon's Mines, this book. The book was also made into a somewhat lackluster film starring Richard Chamberlain and Sharon Stone. King Solomon's Mines, and the follow-up, Alan Quatermain and the Lost City of Gold. It was one of those movies that came out after Raiders of the Lost Ark, trying to cash in on the pulp adventure style that was popular with films like, I think, Chuck Norris with Firewalker, and was it Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner in Romancing the Stone? But this kind of pulp adventure was kind of big in the 80s. Conan and all kinds of those movies. But H. Rider Haggard was one of those great men of history. And I don't say great to mean he was a good man. I don't know if he was a good or bad man, but he was an interesting man. And he lived a very big, adventurous, and just very interesting life. I'll put a link to his wiki, and if you don't know anything about H. Rider Haggard, it's probably a good idea to look him up. He was very instrumental in kicking off this kind of adventure fiction. Usually white men, British men going to exotic places. Back in the days when this was written, they probably called it Oriental adventures. That term was did not have the negative connotations that it does today. They just meant it as the overall Orient, but they would group a whole bunch of countries together and try to kind of make them all sound the same. This was first published in 1885, and it does have some kind of problematic qualities with some racism, but Haggard, he did seem to treat the cultures that he was utilizing, that he was exploiting, with a little bit of respect. More respect probably than writers later, which would come and work in the pulp tradition, like H.P. Lovecraft or Robert E. Howard. He definitely had some old school feelings towards minorities, but he also really did respect their culture, and he did a lot of world traveling and was very interested in other cultures. So if you're interested in this kind of old fiction, this old adventure fiction, King Solomon's Mines is a cool choice. It's written in a very wordy style, but I think it is immensely readable, and it is a great adventure novel. But I wanted to touch on a couple of things that I failed to mention in the last video real quick, and the first is combat. I do really like the combat in this game. I think it's pretty interesting, and even though it is a lot of dice rolling, I like how the entire combat is handled in a single die roll. You don't have to worry about attacking and defending. It all happens at once. So we're going to take just a quick look at an example round of combat, which is also featured on our cheat sheet. So we're going to pretend that we're attacking this crazy creature, this dwarvish whipster here, not hipster. But the stats on the enemy cards are as follows. That is their movement. That is how much courage damage they do. So when you first meet a character, you take courage damage, and you would move up or down your courage track depending on if you're taking damage or gaining courage. This is their combat value. That's the number of successes you need to hit. This is their armor. That's how many hits they deflect. This is their health. This is their attribute that you have to test if you want to run away. And this is how many experience, how many soul shards they are worth when you kill them. This up here is something they do when you roll a critical miss, and if you take any damage and you roll that critical miss, then that triggers and you have some bad stuff happen to you. So let's say that we were fighting that little guy with Harrison Quatermass the 13th, and let's say we were equipped with this amazing enchanted blade. This is a strength weapon. We would take a look at our strength, which is 4, which that means that we would add 4d12 to our dice pool. We would take a look at this card, which gives us a 3 to our combat rolls. That little mouth is a combat roll, so we would add 3 more. And then this weapon also gives you a +1 to all checks. Combat is considered a check, so you would add another d12, and that would constitute our dice pool for this attack. Now, this amazing weapon also says that it succeeds on a 4, 5, or 6 in combat. Normally, it's just a 5 or a 6, but now we can look for 4, 5s, or 6. 4, 5s, or 6s. So the first thing you can do is, if you don't want to attack the creature, you can try to run away. You do an agility test, and you need that many successes to successfully run away after you take your courage damage. At the beginning of the combat, you take your courage damage, and then we have our dice pool, and now we're going to roll. We're looking for 4, 5s, or 6s. We got some 2s there. We got a 5. We got a critical miss, which is a 1. We got a 4. We got, this was a 6, a critical success, and another critical success, and another critical miss. Critical misses, it doesn't really matter if you get more than 1. So what you do now is we have 1, 2, 3, we have 4 successes. We needed 3 to hit. And so we hit the, we do the damage to him. And since we beat his combat value, we don't take damage. And so this critical miss does not trigger. And so that's basically how combat is handled. It's all in one roll. You don't have to roll defense and attack. And it's pretty quick once you get the hang of it. So I actually really like the combat in this game, especially when you start getting some super cool weapons and armor and that kind of stuff. The next thing I just want to take a look at is the searching. I think the searching is pretty cool here. So you have this search chart, and when you go into certain rooms, you can search. You can take a search action in rooms to try to find certain things, and at certain points, you also are going to have this search token. And at the beginning of the game, it's going to be in the green position. And each time you search, you're going to rotate it clockwise, then to yellow, then to red, and back to green. And depending on what color column you are on the search token, you're going to roll your d12, and you're going to consult what it says. So green is safe. If you roll a 1, you will have a misadventure. If you roll a 2 or 3, you'll have an adventure. If you roll a 4, 5, or 6, you're going to get certain treasure. The Fortune Hunter, the yellow, is a little more dangerous. You can spawn enemies, but you can also get treasure. The Glory Seeker, when you're in red, is very dangerous, but you can also get one of these artifacts, which are super powerful weapons. So I really like that search chart. I like the way that the token works. I like the way that it's kind of a pressure luck system. So is the combat, because the more of these d12s you roll, the more chances of you getting one of those critical misses, which can be quite devastating to your character if you don't, if you take any damage. All right, so now we're going to take a look at some of the cards here. So one of the things that I like about this game, like I said, is that it offers you, it creates the sense of illusion that anything can happen at any time. And a large part of that has to do with this deck here, this massive deck. So this is with all of the expansions. And this is the Adventure and Misadventure deck. I believe there are about 120 of each, maybe about 140. You have the green, the adventure side there, and then on the back you have the misadventure side. So depending on if you're going to have an adventure or a misadventure, If you walk into this room, you will have an adventure. The adventure's a better chance of something good happening if you succeed. If you walk into this room here, you will have a misadventure. And a misadventure, if you succeed, you have a better chance of preventing something bad from happening to you. And this deck here is absolutely wild. And I believe that this is the kind of deck that is just so sorely missing from games like Zombicide or Massive Darkness or other, miniature style dudes on a map, dungeon crawl adventure games that just don't have this kind of attention to narrative events and little things that can happen to your character. One of the things that this game does so well is it's so theme forward. It is so focused on its theme, and the theme is pretty narrow, like pulp adventure, the kind of stuff you would find in Astonishing Tales or Weird Tales or any of the pulp magazines. And because the theme is so tightly focused, weird little serendipitous things happen all of the time. Little connections will happen, and it's easy for like us as humans, because we're always looking for connections. We're always looking for coincidence. So sometimes just like when certain things add up, we think like, oh man, like this game was thinking like crazy. You might go into a room that has a picture of a snake on it, and the next adventure card you draw will say, you stumble upon a den of snakes. And that kind of stuff happens just all the time in this game. It's uncanny how often that kind of stuff happens, and that's one of the reasons why I like this game. It's all pure randomness. It's not like carefully thought out narrative circumstances that you stumble upon. This game does such a good job of melding the theme with the gameplay and just the entire experience. Some of these are really good, and some of them are not. They are kind of hit and miss, but there are so many of them, and so many of them are fun. So like if you were to walk into a room and you were told to draw an adventure and you drew this card, you would say, you glance from right to left and see parrots staring at you from all angles. Carved parrots everywhere. Parrot statues and parrot taxidermies hanging on strings. You look closer and realize, so this, you would do a check. You would do a knowledge check. So if you were playing this Mary Sue here, you would get to roll 5d12, and you would need a two successes to pass. This reminds me of my favorite attraction at Disneyland, which is the Tiki Room. I love the Tiki Room. If you pass, you read this description. If you fail, you read the next one. So let's say we rolled and we passed, and we would say, those parrots are real. They all start talking at once, each speaking in a secret, each speaking of a secret. You try to clear your mind and learn as much as you can. It's unbelievable how much they know. After a few minutes of gibbering, they all fly through a hole in the ceiling. You would gain a +1 to your knowledge and a +1 to your mythos. So you get to level up those two stats just by passing that test. If you failed this, their eyes, they're really watching you. Then the voices start. You look around, searching for the source of the strange sounds, but you can't find it. You're thoroughly creeped out now. -1 courage. All right, so let's see what the misadventure would be on this card. You smell the harsh aroma of ammonia. You look around, but can't find the source. But you find something more disturbing. The walls seem to be moving as though they're pulsing with life. Again, a knowledge check with no successes, so you only need 1, no number. If you pass it, you know very well that the room is filled with giant vampire bats. You tread softly, taking care not to disturb them. You do what you must and move on as soon as you can. +1 courage. If you failed that, you blunder around the room, knocking things over and making a big ruckus. The walls churn and 1,000 bats, giant vampire bats, fly at you. They bite at you all over and then fly away. You become infected. So we'll take a look at some of these statuses in a bit. But there are so many. And every time I play the game, I shuffle these. So I'm never quite sure what grouping I'm going to get, which card I'm going to draw. There are some that I probably have never seen, and the way that these combine with the narrative triggers in the game while you are playing the different scenarios, they just make for a seemingly endless possibility of interesting things that can happen to you while you are playing this game. And it is this deck that I think really elevates this to the status of a great adventure game. This is the deck that made me super happy when I realized what it was, and this is kind of like the gold standard of narrative encounter cards that I want to see in more games. Next up, we have our huge deck of monster cards. Now, I love this because the monster cards are not only represent their stats and everything, but this is what you use when you are fighting a monster. When the monsters are moving around the board, you just put the card in the little standee there, little stand, and then this becomes your monster standee. Super useful. It has cool art, and it has all the stats, so you don't need to have a whole separate deck in addition to your monster standee or mini. This is the kind of thing that's like form and function, and I really appreciate that. And there are a huge number of different kinds of enemies. Vampires, undead, there's another undead. One of the expansions dealt with vampires and the undead. We already saw this dwarvish whipster. We've got raptor packs and alpha wolves, alpha dogs. We've got venomous spiders, a Champawat tiger, Blackbeard's keepers, skeletons. I want every dungeon crawl I play to have skeletons that I can fight. One of my favorite enemies. We have soldiers, because a lot of times these pulp adventures, it's man versus man. Stone Spirit of Olmec. My wife's been fighting Olmec a lot in Spelunky 2. More soldiers. Draconian Alkalite, a mythical creature. A Keeper of the Tomb, undead mummy. We've got Guardians of the Deep, a golem. So just all kinds of different creatures here that you can fight. And always something to keep you on your toes. Some of them are pretty deadly, while some of them are pretty easy to deal with, but there is a great variety. Additionally, you have the elite creatures, and these come out at certain points, and they are more powerful. I don't believe they're not just more powerful versions of the cards of the regular enemies, they are different. So we have our terracotta army, our terracotta warriors there. A doppelganger kind of takes the form of, takes your stats. Pretty difficult. I've been killed by doppelgangers many times. The unnameable lich, undead. The Hound of Tyndalos, some Lovecraftian and some mythos horror there. A Sphinx, the Vampiric Gargoyle, Jax Evermorning, an undead soldier, Army of the Dead, Tombs of the Undead, and there we go. The Knights Templar zombie-looking guys there. The Skeleton Pirate. The Spawn of Cerberus, the Emperor's Elite Guard, the Mongol Spirit Dragon Golem. Yeah, all kinds of this deck really gets creative with the kinds of enemies that you will face off against. Again, always fun. It's always fun to draw an enemy in this game because you just never know what you're going to get, and it's almost always something interesting. Now we're kind of coming over to more of the good cards here. The first deck here is the companions or the allies. So like I said, depending on how many characters you're playing with, if you're playing with, I think it's less than 4, you're going to start with some allies. You can also find these allies on your adventure, but these allies are super cool. They will either add to your stats, they can take actions, some of them can fight, some of them will add to your actions. Some of them will allow you to have cool bonuses. This is awesome. A singing scimitar. It's a sentient weapon. It gives you an armor, and then it says that you may use this for combat checks. Roll 5 dice, ignores armor. So it's like 5 dice attack that ignores armor. You can use this ally, if only this ally takes damage from this combat. So a lot of the allies can take damage. So this sword can take 10 damage before you die, before it dies. When you take damage, you can also pass that on to your allies. So you can use your allies as meat shields. We have this Joseph Marks here, kind of a sniper. Mia Rosenberg. She, when you gain this ally, search the item deck and take the bandages. So she helps you heal, and then roll double health gained from the rest action. So yeah, she's a good healer. This is a really cool ally, Soul of Santorini. It's a spirit cat, and not only does it double all of the experience gained throughout the game for your character, but you can store your experience in this, like in this spirit animal. And at certain points of the game, I believe it's like when enemies target, they will target the hero with the most soul shards, with the most XP. But if you put your soul shards here, if you store your soul shards in this Soul of Santorini, the enemy doesn't see them. So you can get a whole bunch of experience, buy a whole bunch of things from the Mongol, and all kinds of stuff with that. All right, so we have the Major Victory, Landon Rabbit's Foot Jace, and just all kinds of super cool allies that will give you certain bonuses. For some reason, I have 2 of the Avatar of Perseus, and I'm not sure why. And then next up, we have our Soulmonger card. So these are where you can spend your XP, your soul shards, on very powerful weapons and items. Map of the Tombs traps, Panacea, Robes of the Illuminous Templars, the Circlet of Mentality, the Essence of Souls, the Lion's Breath. It's all kinds of cool stuff, but to tell you the truth, I don't take advantage of this deck nearly enough. The next time I play, I'm going to go out of my way to get a couple more of these because I don't ever see them enough. And then now we are on to our item deck, which is a big deck of items. A lot of these items your different characters will start with, but you have things like swords, machetes, eldritch staves, leather jackets that somehow provide armor, probably in the cool factor, healing salves, pickaxes. So some of these will add to your bonuses. Some of these are used in combat. Some are used for different kinds of checks. Most of them have more than one thing that you can use them for, which is really cool. It's always kind of disappointing in a game when an item only gives you one thing, but a lot of the weapons in here will give you like a, you know, like this whip. This whip gives you a +1 to combat, plus it gives you a +2 to trap checks. You know, you can use your rope to bypass traps, swing over them, or use it to trigger them. You are immune to the pit trap, and discard. You can discard this to use a rope token to get down to that 3rd level. So really cool uses of cards. Interesting and creative uses of weapons and items in this game, which makes every time you draw one of these, it makes for an exciting time. And like I have said before, the first time I played this game, I just had so much fun because I was walking around with like a retinue of like 3 allies. I had a rocket launcher, a whip, a leather jacket, a fedora. You can get a sword. I mean, I was just like walking around like a one-man army, just ready to beat down anything that came into my path. And it was so much fun to use everything. And that's why this game is a masterclass in abundance, just because of the sheer number of things that you can do and the number of things that can happen to you. These are the artifacts, so sometimes you will be able to search for these. Often these are given out as rewards for certain scenario triggers. These are like the elite items here. You have the Book of Life, the Staff of Ra, the Ruby Scarab, the Book of Death, Aladdin's Lamp, the Sword of Perseus. Yeah, this is an awesome sword here. Really cool. Gives you a +5 to your combat, a +2 to your strength. So already it's a strength weapon. You're already adding 7 dice. So if you had this, you would have 7. If you had Alan Quartermanis, you would add 4. So you would be rolling like 11 d12. I think one time I was playing with my my buddy and his wife, And I think she rolled like 17 D12 on one attack. It was amazing. It was so cool. That was a game that like all of my friends were doing really good. They were running around with all these weapons and stuff, and I just kept dying and having no luck whatsoever. It was a really funny game. And even when I die in this game, even when I'm like not doing well, I have fun. Finally, we have this deck here. This is one complaint I have is these are the statuses, all the different statuses you can have. They are double-sided with negative statuses on one side and positive statuses on the other. And because they're double-sided, it's hard to keep them in alphabetical order because you might be alphabetical order on one side, but then when you flip it, they're not. And so sometimes when you are looking through this deck to find the status that you need to add to your character, it can take a little time. Some of them are really nasty. Being infected really sucks. Being jinxed is terrible. It's like being cursed in Arkham. So you really want to try to avoid getting a negative status. And they are kind of hard to get rid of. And you really want to try hard to get one of the positive statuses because they are quite good. Like this adrenaline, every upkeep at the beginning of every turn you gain 1 courage, so you can get up on your courage track pretty quickly to get those special bonuses. But yeah, it is a little difficult searching through these, and I just wish that there was just a better solution to this. But I understand they wanted to, utilizing both sides is efficient. And next up we have our tomb deck. So after the adventurers take their turn, you're going to use this tomb deck to find out how the tomb reacts to you. And certain things are going to happen. You're having a tomb effect that's going to trigger, and certain things are going to happen to all the characters. In this instance, all characters would gain 2 courage. Then you are going to move creatures, and then any creatures in a space with an explorer will do combat. Then you're going to spawn creatures. Creatures spawn on tiles that have a red back outline, a red border. So that's where they would spawn. And then you do your upkeep, and then you rotate your search tokens, like we said before, and then the comet track moves. The comet track is kind of like a timer. Usually this will trigger certain story events as it reaches certain numbers. Now you have a green deck and a red deck. The green you can use if you want an easy game. The red you can use if you want a more difficult game. What I usually do is I take the green deck and I add either all of the red or a certain number of red. If the mission is already supposed to be hard, I will add maybe only 5 red cards. If the mission is easy, I will add 10 or so. So you can control how difficult your game gets by deciding how many of each card you want in your tomb deck. That is super cool. Next up, we have here one of the decks from one of the expansions, and this is how you ascend. Remember, I've mentioned something about ascending, about your characters leveling up. Well, at the beginning of the game, you are going to pass these out to each character, and this is going to give you like little side quests to do. Every time you gain courage, gain 2 points. Every time you collect 10 soul shards, gain 3 points. When you gain an artifact, gain 5 points. And so on. Each one is different with its own little story about your side mission. And then you keep track of your points on here. And when you get up to 20, you get to level up your character. You get to use that cool tall standee and flip your card over to this super powerful side and really kick some butt. And then these are the trader cards. You can mix one of these in with the cards that you pass out to the characters at the beginning of the game. And then if somebody gets one of these, they're going to do their thing, and then they will reveal themselves as a trader and usually have some kind of special win condition. And finally, in this episode, we're going to take a look at the bosses. And there are a lot of different bosses that you can fight in this game. The bosses have the same stats and look as a regular enemy card. They're just full poker-sized cards. Usually the boss will also have their additional rules inside the scenario in which they appear. So you have people like Feng Kwang, Helga Gunhilder, Magilder Maggie Erickson, Ra Azur Ahamat, Dante Falcone, the Twin Fang, and his twin sister, Margot Mullins, the Twin Fang. Dr. Wiseman, the Arachne, the Spider Queen, Quelaag from Dark Souls there. Colonel Clemens, the Hell Golem, the Premier Draconian, Zombie Overseer, War, the Red Horseman, not the Rad Horseman. That would be pretty cool if he was the Rad Horseman. Pestilence, the White Horseman. Famine, the Black Horseman. And, of course, Death. Death rides a pale horse. The Kraken, the Wendigo. That's a weird... I always wonder if that was supposed to be a Wendigo, but interesting look there. Harrison Quatermanis XIII, he can become bad, and you have to fight the ultimate Mary Sue. Herathulu, the Herald of Cthulhu. Cthulhu's little brother, maybe. Protean, the ever-changing, the super doppelganger. Blackbeard, the possessed. Onibo Murasama, the dark soul. Emperor Dracus. Emperor Dracus evolved, so he has like a final form. And then Prince Barun, the Forsaken. So yeah, that is another look at the cards of Secrets of the Lost Tomb. This amount of cards here is so nice. It's manageable, but it had so much. There's so much variety here. It is always fun to draw a card in this game. And the cards do a great job of expanding on the theme, of embellishing the things that are happening while you are playing, and they help create that illusion of exploration, which is so important. Next time, we're going to take a look at the expansion books and probably have some final thoughts. The final thoughts might come in the next episode. I'm not sure if it's going to do 3 or 4, but stay tuned for more Secrets of the Lost Tomb. Take it easy. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.